is this something that I could possibly automate, delegate, or eliminate from my day? And then the final one I'm going to ask is like, is this the highest and best use of my time? Welcome to the Moms Makin Dough podcast. I'm your host, Kendra Hewitt, and today's episode is something that I used to really resist, the concept of time blocking. But if you are like me, and if you have ever looked up at your your laptop at the end of the day and said, "Holy shit, how is it possible that based on what time it is in relationship to the amount of stuff I've completed," then this episode is for you. So, I was actually working with a client this morning, and I was really kind of unsure what I was going to talk about when I got to the recording part of our podcast today. And we spent a full coaching call on this concept, and we started working through some of her beliefs about it. And I was like, man, this is something that I used to have a lot of beliefs about that I just started to realize has become much more natural, much more accepted, and so much more powerful for me. So if you are ready to go from, like I said, resisting the concept of time blocking, not knowing where to start, not how to do it, hopefully this episode will help you do just that. And it will help you bring more presence, peace, productivity, and of course, profitability into your life. So let's dive in. I wanted you to kind of just think about like how many times I remember last week is a perfect example. I was going on a trip. I was traveling on a Thursday, and then this is very rare, but I'm also traveling this Thursday for another couple days, and that's going to be out of the country. So it was interesting because I had to shift my schedule to really be even more sensitive to protecting that time, knowing I'm not really going to be available for this trip. Like if someone needs something, I'm not as easily accessible for this upcoming one. So it really showed me and pointed out how far I have come in this concept. And I'm going to walk you through my exact process that when I thought about doing this episode, like how I would walk someone through it. And then also what I did, even with, like I said, my client this morning. Because here is what I find when you are given an allotment of time, there's like some rule on this. It has a, this has a is a principle that has an actual name. I just am totally spacing on what that name is. It'll come to me. But basically, when you have a more time. So in this case scenario, it's like when I was thinking about it, that this is an entrepreneur has more of a range of time right now to work on her business, but she's filling it with things that really aren't moving the needle for her. So we were really starting to hone in on like what are those things that move the needle so that we could start really refining what her schedule is. But then when you get to a point where like I was this week where I'm traveling, so I'm having a smaller window of time, I find that I am so much more productive and protective of how I use this time. So I'm taking that lesson and I'm going to leverage it in what I'm going to share with you, but also I've done for myself this week. So I kind of wrote down a process, and this is a process that I've built out over time. It didn't really hit me till today that like how much I repeat this lately and how much I do this in bits and pieces with clients. So I'm hoping to put it all into one so you can utilize it and start to put it into your practice. So first of all, the first step in this time audit process is really starting to get a reality check, a checkup from the neck up on where are you spending your time. And this is to literally get it out of your head and onto a piece of paper or onto your computer or into a digital app, whatever way that best helps you. And the goal of the time audit is to observe a minimum of 5 days. I like to say it's 5 working days, but I also, in a perfect world, I like to see 2 weeks when I'm working, especially with a high level entrepreneur, because I get a bigger picture of where that is going when we're looking to refine it. how that is going on a longer time frame. But minimum 5 days, and it is not rocket science, but it is not fancy, but you're just going to record what you do in hourly increments. Now, if you want to get even more strategic, I have a lot of my clients, high level executives, entrepreneurs, record this in 30-minute increments, because I have found that the hour window is actually a little bit longer than our attention span in our modern day society, with the intense amount of distractions that are coming into um, our brains and our bodies. So I want you to just write it down, don't judge it, don't just observe it. And I'm not even going to create a template for this, because I literally do it as a brain dump. Like, where I literally have a old school piece of paper and I write down the time from the time I sit down or start working. If you want to, you can get even more strategic. I'm going to give some personal examples as well, where you literally start from the time you wake up to the time you go to bed, and you record everything you do, even like showering and all of this kind of things, because those are also what we're going to talk about today, which is like those are transition times. And when your brain is having to constantly task switch from things like, maybe you need to be creative and you're working on content. Maybe you're switching from that to, sending out and paying invoices. So you're doing more task management stuff. And then maybe you're switching gears and you're training your team or meeting with your team, or meeting with a client. Just those three things are three different total approaches, mindsets, and energies that need to be present. So there is a lot of mental load that comes with it. So I want you to record, in a perfect world, a minimum of 5 days, both business and personals. And the next step you're going to kind of look is what I call, like I'm talking about right now, the transition tax, right? So you want to start to look for patterns. Like, how many times on average of these 5 days am I doing a transition? Now, when I first started doing this, it was absolutely alarming, because I was trying to go from, hey, I just did a coaching call, to now I'm doing a call with my insurance person, to now I have to write a outline for a reel I'm going to do, or I have to write a content outline for my social media assistant. And then I would go to, now I need to get something uploaded for Lily's school. And now I need to call the lumber yard to get a lumber delivery for a project on a real estate investment we have. And literally, this is what my day looked like. Even like last week when I did this exercise, it was literally, I had on average 5 to 10 very different transitions. And here's what you find. I know there's a study that also does this, is that they did a study, I don't know what the name of it was, where they basically taught, a couple employees a concept of something that they needed to implement in the workplace. And they taught it directly, and they had no access to phones, no access to email. There was no distractions other than the person they had to focus on. And then what happened from there is that then they took a different group of employees, same number of employees, 30 people, 30 people, and they introduce and ask them to do multiple things in the process of learning, also with access to distractions. So they could have their phones on them. They could check out their email. They would even put them in, like, part of their tasks would be like they teach them something and then they'd ask them to email it to themselves. And the amount of retention and lost productivity and energy on the group that had all the distractions, it was like the group that didn't have any literally had 80% more retention than the group that had all of these distractions. So really start to think about like how much this transition tax is costing you by you totally switching gears multiple times a day. And you want to start to bring awareness to how often that is happening in your day. And just think about like going from content creation to admin work to pick up from school even those three transitions are three vastly different ones. So here's what I realized. I started to realize that I was losing, just with the amount of transitions I was doing, on average about 10 hours a week of my productivity when I did this with myself. So I want you to really start to look at that transition tax and those patterns of how many times you are switching gears. And then I want you to start to next step is really evaluate each task, right? So this is step number 3. And so let's say, like I said, you're doing admin type work. Let's say that it's, content type work. I want you to really start to ask yourself 3 questions. And number 1 is this necessary? Is this something I need to be doing? The next and I literally what I did is when I asked this question, I will go down each thing on my daily list of my looking at my time, and I will start writing. Is it necessary? Yes or no, right? Yes or no answer. No stories in between. Can this be leveraged? Is this something that I could possibly automate, delegate, or perhaps eliminate from my day? And then the final one I'm going to ask is like, is this the highest and best use of my time? Because there are going to be things on that list that are necessary. There are going to be things that could be eliminated, like doom scrolling, right? And there also are going to be things that actually I love doing, I enjoy doing, and I 100% know this is the highest and best use of my time. Therefore, it is something I want to retain as my responsibility and to be responsible for in terms of completing. And I want you to say I'll give you a personal example of how this showed up with me um just at the beginning of the school season, right? So we're a month into the school season, and when I started with school, one of my new rules was there was going to be no television before school. My daughter just turned 5 years old last week, which it goes by so fast, and one of the things I found me doing is that I would often have things that I needed to get done, so it was convenient for me to put her in front of the TV while I got those things done. Things like get myself ready, get myself breakfast, things that I needed to be getting up earlier to do. But the biggest thing I noticed in my morning routine with my daughter was that I would allow my phone to be present. And my office, my physical office starts at 7 a.m. So school window for me getting her ready is roughly around 6:30 to or 6:45ish to 7:45 when she goes to school. So that's that hour that I needed to start protect. And slowly, slowly, I would have my phone in the kitchen and I would see a text come in when our office opens at 7 of like, hey, we need everything random from like, "Hey, can we go get some we need some more toilet paper," to, "Hey, the heating isn't working," to, "Hey, did you order this for the office because we wanna set it up today?" Or, "Hey, do I have still time to update payroll?" So all these little things that I would normally just think would take seconds to respond to, but then if I looked at it, if I got an average of 3 to 5 different questions or texts, "Can I reschedule my coaching call today?" All these things I would have to respond to, and I would be behind. And then my daughter would take the brunt of that because I would be rushing her when it was actually really I was at cause of the rush. So I started to make a rule. When we started school this year, there were 2 rules, one for mommy, one for Lily. And the one mummy one was, my phone stays on the charger until she is dropped off at school. And then the other thing that would happen is that she would eat breakfast and we would do her whole routine. And if time allowed, we would have time for a show. Now, here's what's started to happen. My daughter now stops tries to get all of the routine done because she would rather play with me instead of actually watch a show, because I am available to be played with instead of just checking a couple things that I could shoot off a text on. So that's just a real raw and personal example of like things I noticed. I started writing down for 5 days. I wrote down, what did our school routine look like? And I started to, like I said, identify these patterns and these transition taxes that were costing me time. And then I asked the following 3 questions. I evaluated, is this necessary? Is the phone necessary? No. If it is necessary, I tell people If it is an emergency, that's when you call me because I know if you call me, I need to pick up quickly, not via text. Can this be leveraged? Now, can I leverage my daughter's morning routine? There's times when my husband's there, but like I said, he's usually in the office. So therefore, that is not always possible. But the days that he is here to help me, which are Monday and Wednesdays, I have him do specific things that I know he is responsible for, like he packs her lunch. Now, the days that I do morning routine, I pack her lunch the night before because then it's one less thing I have to do and I can be available to play. But it wasn't until I started to look at these 5 days, even of what that looked like, that I could start to make some changes. So the same is going to apply for not only your personal life, but your business. From the time I start my day to the time my work day is how many times am I doing that transition and then asking myself, is this necessary? Could this be leveraged to someone else, either automated, delegated, and or eliminated, and or is this something that I absolutely need to be doing? For example, sitting here recording my podcast, I can't leverage that to someone else, and I actually really enjoy it, look forward to it. So it is time that is super valuable for me. And then we're going to start to look at, once we have those 3 steps done, we now have a good assessment for us to work off of. So this is where we want to start to build blocks around how we want to spend our time and how we want to manage our energy. I love to use color coding for this, and I will go through my task list and I'll start to color code them. I just use highlighters. Like I said, I use it is not a sophisticated system. And I use blue for business, pink for family, green for self care, and yellow for like administration stuff that needs to be tended to, but it's definitely not my highest and best use. But the reason I use the yellow on that one is that it is usually there is some sort of time sensitivity that I need to be aware of. And then I want to start to build blocks around my zone of genius. So, like those things that I know are highest and best use, I want to prioritize those on my schedule. So, if you're looking at this as like the time audit is 3 steps, and then this process of actually building out your block schedule is going to be also 3 steps, where I like to do the color coding first and then start to look at like my energy zones. What is the best time for me to create content? What is the best time for me to do tasks? And I'm going to give you an example of my week, because you want to start to block things around prioritizing the things that your highest and best use before you have to start blocking things that you are necessary, and then things that, like I said, you prefer not to do. Maybe you can outsource them, maybe you can't. So, structure your ideal week is going to be your next step. And this is where you're going to start to put some blocks. And I actually take a physical calendar Monday through Friday, and I'm going to give you like a illustrated example so this can maybe help you start to generate some ideas of what yours could look like. And so, for example, I only do coaching calls right now. I call them the bookends, Mondays and Fridays. So I have a set block of time that I do coaching calls. I also have a set block of time that I do discovery calls on those days. Discovery calls are calls with new clients. And or discovery calls are what I call an interchangeable block for me. They also could be personal calls that I need to do. Like, let's say I need to update my life insurance policy, or I need to talk to my CPA, or something like that, where they also could go in those blocks if they are not filled up with prospective client calls. So, because I was losing a tremendous amount of transition by doing calls where I had blocks during the day and I was accommodating other people's schedules before I did my own. So, in my personal life, I set up 2 schedules on Calendly, one for my coaching clients and then one's for my prospective clients slash personal calls, which I call discovery calls. And so what ends up happening is that I'm not task switching. I'm not losing a lot of time, but the reason that I have 2 different blocks is the personal calls and the prospective client calls, they're a little bit of a different mindset. I'm getting a lot of data. I'm getting more information. I need to be much more aware of what they're sharing versus my coaching calls, I need to be more prepared because I need to prepare by reading what we did last time and figuring out what framework we're going to follow, where we are in the process of our coaching process. So I have to block an hour of prep time for for current clients. And then I also need an hour of prep time for where I'm going to switch into fact mode. Did I get all information I needed from this prospective client so I can help them in the initial conversation? But they are both the same thing where I'm going to be at my desk for a certain period of time on Zoom or on calls. And so I prefer to block them all together rather than space them out randomly at the end of the day. And then on Tuesdays and Thursdays, that's when on Tuesdays is typically when I create content and work on my content schedule because my social media assistant schedules everything for me on Wednesdays. Thursdays is when I have a lot of meetings. These are meetings with my bookkeeper, my team, my staff, my husband. These are things where I have a block where I know that these are times that I need to be, again, have time allowed to prepare, but I also can stay in meeting mode instead of go from meeting to coaching mode to task management mode. And then once meeting mode is complete, I switch into task oriented mode for the business. Wednesday is my buffer day. This is the day where I can have both business and personal buffers, and it's primarily a task management day where I go from one thing to the other, sending out invoices, paying invoices, um, billings, like looking at my financial numbers in preparation for my meetings the next day. And then on Fridays, like I said, those are typically calls. And then I've talked a lot about this on the podcast before, my financial Friday follow ups, which is I call my Friday date, where I look at both my personal and business finances and I prep and look at some of the targets that I'm looking at hitting for the rest of the month. So what I like to say is like, I'd like to break my ideal week into creative work, what I call connection work. That's my team meetings and my client meetings. And then I have CEO time, which is like money metrics. These are where I do like invoices and billing and that sort of thing. And then there's like personal recharge. This is where I focus on like, hey, what are my workouts this week? Where's my faith time for my spirituality? Where is that going to be worked in this week? Where's my margin where like if I'm not allowed to fill it with anything else because I need to be on time for school or something like that. And then where's my family time? What do we have for family dates? What do I have for dates with my husband scheduled? This is me really looking and refining on what do I want that ideal schedule to look like. And then the third step I'm going to look at once I do that is what are the items that I'm doing that I could get help with, that I could essentially buy back my time. And I want to calculate this. I take this from that book, Buy Back My Time, where I'm going to start to calculate what my income is and then divided by the number of working hours that I work, because this is my hourly rate. And it's not fancy. Like I said, it's super simple. I want to eliminate or outsource anything that costs me more in time, but saves me money. So, for example, let's say your time is worth $100 an hour. You need to stop doing $20 an hour tasks or even $50 an hour tasks because you make double that. So, this is where the third final part is I start to ask what task could someone else be doing better, faster, and or cheaper than I could be doing? What systems can I replace? I mean, AI has been so helpful with a lot of this stuff, but could I replace scheduling? Could I replace invoicing? Could I replace email replies with an assistant that goes through my email? That's usually everyone's first hire. My first hire on my coaching side of my business has been a social media assistant because I was losing so much time just scheduling and editing and all of that kind of stuff. And she helps me do all of that. So it gets out consistently and I take me out of the equation. So that was the first thing. Now I'm on to the next task I need to replace. And that's a target for me. So this is where I really think that you can really start to refine how you define block scheduling and really, really start to dig in and think about how you can make block scheduling not only work for your life, but absolutely change it. So I hope this episode has given you just even a slice of what this could do and how much freedom this could create for you in both your business and your personal life. But it could also bring so much more peace, presence, productivity, and profitability if put in place. I hope you enjoyed this episode. And if you did, please share it with someone else who may benefit from listening to it. And as always, please rate, review, and subscribe to Moms Making Dough. And we'll see you next time.